G'day guys, it's Calvin, Coaching Company in New Zealand. Right, this video is actually for Jesse. I've been setting up his combine harvester, what is it? It's a John Deere 9770 harvester that he's modified and put a seed destructor on the back of it. And I've built a warning system using a link monsoon. We're going to go through for Jesse on all about his system because it's possibly not normal. So we're going to go into the G4X software. We will need the ECU plugged into the laptop, which I have not done because I've got other things plugged in. Let's put it in here. So my ECU is in the lounge. I've got an extension cable through the link communication cable into the USB, and there it is. You hear it clicking in, and the ECU is plugged in, and look at that. I've got like a 2.5. Well, that's more than 2.5 because the lounge is like more than that. Oh no, it's just down there though. Maybe it is a 2.5 or 3 meter extension cable to the link communication cable, and look, I'm in. Cool, eh? I've actually got my own little screen set up for Jesse too, but that was what I've done for testing. I just changed the speed sensors here. Oh look, I got both of them still. It works. Right. We look out for little arrows like this. Okay, we've got some menus across the top and the menus down the side. I should explain that Jesse's actually a farmer. I'm about to teach a farmer in Australia, an Australian farmer, about link ECUs, which is a New Zealand product. And I often think of myself more of a farmer than a mechanic. So, but Jesse and I talk the same language, so he will understand me, I hope. So you're going to download the software. It's going to come up with a generic setup for you. And you can change it, but hopefully it'll work with just the normals as it was, okay? I do a lot of the setup in the configuration because that's for setting up the configuration. But the other advantage with the configuration is you get this help browser of what's going on. So that's really, really helpful. We're going to look first at the primary input, which is on the front drive shaft, which is closest to the engine, so it's actually going to be an engine RPM. So we're going to go, sorry, did I just do stuff there quickly? I went ECU settings, and, oh no, we won't do that. Well, I'll show you the configuration I've set it up as. Seed destructor. I've set it up as a 12-cylinder 4-stroke. The ignition had to be turned on to make the knock sensor work. It's not running the ignition at all, but doing 12 cylinders times 80-degree knock window, I've covered the full 720, plus there's some overlap. So 2 revolutions of 360, 720. And I can put lots of other stuff in here. What I could put in here? I can put some memos in here. There we go. Pop a memo in there. The firing order doesn't matter. None of that actually matters because we're not firing injectives. I just had to have the ignition on. So we're going down to triggers. This is where we will find the first trigger input. Trigger setup. Multi-tooth. Filtering is on default. That if you're getting interference, you can crank it up to 4 and not that prone to interference. It's twisted, shielded cables. So it's the multi-core Tefsel. I doubt we're going to have interference. I'm certainly hoping we don't. Trigger 1. I've only got it on trigger 1. Trigger 1 is a reluctor. So again, if we change that later on to a Hall effect, we need to change that setting. Filtering is low. Again, that's for interference. crank position, so it's on the crank, and if you put a toothed wheel on it, I've set it up for 12 teeth. If you put a different number of teeth on it, then you need to change that. But we know that 12 has worked on my bench, okay? Now, if you look here, then again, you've got this, see, you've got stuff out here. It's got information, so they've made it really easy. Tooth count, because we're not running timing, we don't need to worry about that. Okay, so I probably don't need to talk about it. And the threshold, the triggering threshold. So that's the amount of voltage from the sensor that the sensor has to produce before the ECU thinks that there is actually a trigger present. These are fairly generic. If you get a bigger gap, if you put a bigger gap on it, you may need to drop them down. We can check this stuff. So another part of the program is, I'm going to call them runtime values because it's called runtime values. I might say live data, but we've got this up here, tuning, runtime values. Woo, we got the screen. So triggers is right there because we're looking at triggers. And you've got trig 1 and trig 2, whether they're present. You've got the arming voltage. You see this comes from the screen here. So if it's 750, it's going to be a different number. It'll interpolate between the two. And that allows us to check what they actually are. Before I finish there, I'm just going to go down and trig 2. Trig 2. Now, you go, why are you looking at trig 2? You're not running a trig 2. Well, we have to turn trig 2 off in the trig 2. So see here, sync mode. None. None. It will not sync. Okay. It will not work in multi-tooth trigger mode, but it will work in multi-tooth missing trigger mode. It works just fine because we're not actually running an engine. If we really get trouble, we'll cut a tooth off. But it seems to be doing everything that we need to do, and knock sensing is working. So again, for none works for us, but in a normal engine, you would need a place for it to actually bring up a trigger point. Though I think you can get away with distributed, 1 tooth per TDC. We don't need to worry about calibrating because we're not timing it up. So what I've done by having none on trigger 2 is set it so it's just running off the 1 trigger wheel. And so we get arming voltage there, and we do some runtime values there. I'm going to turn my distributor. So the distributor beside me. And you can see right here, we have a single trigger signal. And we generate an RPM, which is what we want. Because we're at low RPM, below 500, we've got that 0.5 trigger voltage, arming voltage. You see it climbs as my RPM increases, the trigger voltage changes. So that's the front trigger wheel. As far as it going out of the ECU, it goes out over CAN, so we don't need to worry about that. It is going out as engine RPM. Right, the next one, the second engine RPM, or the second drive shaft RPM. As I've told you, we went in as a right front wheel speed sensor. So that is on a digital input. So with digital inputs, and you can see we go, there's a little arrow. We tuck on the little arrow and we go down through digitals, and you can see nowhere in there does it give us a wheel speed sensor. And we look at the input pins. We see here number 1 is a right front wheel speed sensor. We can see number 2 is the micro switch, and number 3 is that dash switch that I haven't put it, it's turned on, but it's not actually there. It's not doing anything at the moment. It's going on for the ride. And even though I fed it on a DI, we've also got, see here, we've got this GP input. And you see it's not on that list there either. And that's because a wheel speed sensor isn't part of the engine running, it's part of the body, normally, chassis body. So if we scroll right to the bottom here, chassis and body, look at that. Again, the little arrow, I left clicky on there, and we've got speed sources. I'm pretty, like my plus sauce is pretty plain, actually tomato sauce. Not really a great fan of chili. And is mayonnaise a sauce or a condiment? Right front wheel speed sensor. Here it is here, DI1. And so this allows us, again, so if we click on there, I can move it round. I could put it to DI4, but the wires don't go to DI4, the wires go to DI1. So you actually need to have the setting coinciding with where the wires go. I can't just magically change the wiring by changing the numbers here. Just checking. I know you're Australian. So pull-up resistor. There's about the pull-up resistors on here. If I was using it like a Hall effect, or if I was going to ground, I'd use a pull-up. I don't need a pull-up because it's reluctant. Falling edge. It wouldn't really matter on this one. It'll pick it up either way. And calibration. So there's actually a whole lot of thing here that works out the calibration if you want to. In this case, I didn't bother. All I needed to do was check the front one and the back one were the same. Okay. What do we got? We've got 6 times. What's 12 times 6? Is it 72? There's got to be something in there in the maths. 12 times 6 is 72, which gives me the same RPM readings. So, looking at runtime values, where's it coming in? Runtime values, here. And digitals here. There's the right front speed sensor, so we'll get a bit of information. So we can see if it's coming in. We see if it goes active or inactive. And then it gives a duty cycle and a frequency. I'm wondering actually if it gives me a speed. I think that is the speed right there, GP speed 1. No, it isn't. Somewhere else. There it is. There's the wheel speed. So under miscellaneous, we've got the wheel speed sensors, so we should get one on there. Of course, it takes a little bit to come up. There it is there. So that's where we can read whether it's coming in. What I did, I'll get rid of the runtimes. I actually set up my own little screen, Deere Harvester, and I used this screen, put some conditions on and set up that screen so I can monitor what's going on and set up the calibrations. And they're pretty close to each other. Okay. I did a different video on the warning conditions. Okay, so that's not in this video. We're just looking at the configuration. Okay, back we go. So we've got our wheel speed sensor, we've got our RPM. While we're doing the digitals, we'll look at those switches. Micro switch. it's not in there. So I went into the input pins, it's the wrong place. If we go up here, again, there was that GP input, there's a little arrow, see it pops down, GP input number 1, microswitch warning. So I click on there, microswitch warning, and there's the source. Again, I can choose the source. I can change this label. Okay, so I can double click and it allows me to change the writing on that. For this one, because the active state, I can go active state high or active state low. Because I've got it going to ground, I've turned the pull-up resistor on, and the active state is high. So when it's open circuit, it will become active. Tuning, runtime values, where do we check it? Little arrows at the top here. We come back, we should find a digital. These are digitals. There's our microswitch warning, active or inactive, right there. Okay, so nice and easy, you can check that, what's going on. And I should actually say at this point, what I'd recommend you do is, when you put it all together, is you go through and you check every single one of these input functions. Check the switch, check it's working, unplug it or activate it. Check that's working. Check the speed sensors. Check the temp sensors. Unplug the temp sensor. Check it goes to default mode, which I'll turn a bit, the default number. Put the heat gun on it. Heat it up a bit. Check it's changing. Okay, the third switch, which I've wired it. It goes to the dash, is that dash switch. So I've got the pull-up resistor off because it's a switch to 12 volts. Okay, I've put the extra plug in it. If it shorts out, of course, it's going to cause issues, so don't short it out. But it goes to high, so it's a 12 volt switch. Of course, you've got the input latch if you want to hold it on and off too. So, but if you've got like a button, but I'm just expecting it to be a switch on-off switch or something like that. If you want it to acknowledge the alarms or whatever, again, that's up to you. It's just an extra if we need to put it in. If you really need to swap it around to become an auxiliary output, we could just pull pins at the ECU as well. Because that's the digitals done. There's those two temp sensors. Now, temp sensors come in on the analog inputs. Analog inputs. Got the arrow. Come down, and there's a couple of presets on this one. One of them is the engine coolant temp, ECT. The other one is the IAT, so we don't have to go to GP inputs. And I put them in as an ECT and an IAT is because I know they go out over that can. Okay. I didn't see if there was the DIs were in that can. I don't think they are. So if we wanted to put that, you know, the state of that micro switch to the dash, that would probably take a custom one, but it buzzes anyway. The buzzer will go off if it pops that micro switch. Right, so we've got, again, come down here, input pins. This is a really neat way. I really like the G4X because it allows you to check what you've put where really fast. ECT and IAT. But you can't adjust them here. What you can do, oh, this one does allow you. Some of them you can't. Don't mind me. You can adjust it there. Also, we've got, see this little arrow here? So you can go back. And that also allows you to, if you click on the connection list, the other stuff that's affected by the ECT. Okay, cool. So I wouldn't actually normally go there. I'd actually normally go here. And so I've got the low warning as 0.5 and the high warning as 4.95. If it goes outside that, so if the wire gets severed or it gets shorted together, grounded together, it goes to 150 degrees. So it will bring up a 150 degree warning on the little dash. and the buzzer will go off. 1 kilo ohm internal, and there's your calibration, which is just a standard NTC. Okay, don't worry about the number. A lot of Bosch NTCs have the same calibration. Negative temperature coefficient. And air temp, it's the same deal. Here it is here. It's pretty much set up the same. Unfortunately, we can't change the heading of IAT in here. So that's temp 1 and temp 2. Same, pretty much they're both set up the same. Right, where do we see them? Of course, tuning, runtime values, analogs. Look at that. And there's your voltages. There's your statuses, but it doesn't actually give you what they are. Sorry, don't mind me. Yeah, I'm just seeing if they put the water temp anywhere else. It's under general. So general, there's your ECT, which is your temp 1, and there's IAT, that's temp 2. Right, we can see the ignition switch is on. We've got no oil pressure. Here's your battery voltage, so you can check your battery voltage in here as well. I could actually put that on that little dash too if you really wanted battery. I was just setting up some other stuff. So if you want to put a battery on that screen, easy to do. So I should say for the guys watching this, this has got a link can gauge. 52 millimeters, really neat little unit. Okay, logging. Temperatures, micro switches. Oh, auxiliary output. The penal mounted dog collar shock system, which was rejected. I'm very disappointed, but we do have some outputs. Just the one, which is the warning buzzer. Auxiliary outputs, there it is. Again, there's that little whoop. And we've got output pins, I think. Warning buzzer 1 is on auxiliary 1, and you can see we've got an ignition on ignition 1, that fake distributor for the 12-cylinder. Excuse me. Oh, knock sensor 2. Okay, we've got all these auxiliaries here are to do with that warning buzzer. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and actually 6 and 7, I think. If we wanted to, we could actually set up more. So number 5 could be relative to 6 and 7 and 8. But I didn't need to because that's the knock. Okay. And it just, if it's on or it's off. Okay, so. And I did another video on the warnings because it was a big video in itself. Knock sensor. Knock control. Little wire. There we go. Basically, by turning it on, it grabs DI4. Okay, so on the monsoon, knock can only go in through DI4, and you can't have two things on DI4. So if you have knock turned on, it defaults and turns DI4 onto knock. There's some settings which we will have a play with, and there'll be some measuring. Again, you'll be using not triggers. Go back to there. Tuning, runtime values, and guess what? There's a heading for knock. There it is there. So you'll be watching the counters. There's a bit of a startup step, so it's going to take you a little bit to get it going because you're going to need both drive shafts to be running. Well, you might get away with just the one, just the front one. and then smack it with a hammer, and you'll end up changing some of the, no, you don't need to change any of that, but you've got this advanced delay, 0.5 of a second, which doesn't seem like a long. You might want to drop that down a little bit, but then you've got some thresholds. Knock threshold, there we go. I've set it very conservative. I smack it at the moment, and you can make it just go nuts. We've got a residual knock of the distributor running of about 40. Again, here's this little arrow, look. And this gain, okay, basically the smaller the number, it changes the level of the knock adjustment, okay. So if you increase that, it'll increase the level of the knock numbers, okay. So we can use that to adjust it a little bit, and then you can work on the thresholds. I don't know what we're going to experience, so basically you get it running, have the engine running, so the front drive shaft is turning, or we'll feed a separate RPM signal in for a bit and start smacking it and see what the actual machine knock level produces. Bit of reading there, so that can help you as well. You can do some counts up in here again, runtime values, that knocks, you can actually monitor it and see what's going on. Okay, so that's the main stuff there. What I'm going to do, I've done some other videos on the logging and setup of logging. I'm going to set up logging here, and I have actually done it. I must have done that the other night when I was half asleep at night. Oh, look at that. So basically logging will turn on when the RPM is above 100, and it brings in, oh yep, those are the main things. So I didn't bring in too much, about 100 hertz. That should be fast enough to pick up most of that. We might need to crank up the knock counts. That's cool. I've done, oh wait, don't want that. Don't mind me, I'm pushing the wrong buttons again. So if we want to add or remove stuff, you pretty much, you go in here, you take a choice, and then you smack that arrow there and it puts it on the list. Or if you take this one here and you smack that arrow there, it goes on the list. And if you want to change the hertz, you look it on that one. Okay, so I think I've put the most of the stuff that we need in there. If it doesn't work, or you want to put something else in there, you can put more in. What I have not checked is turning the logging on. And this is the ECU logging. We've also got PC logging, which if you've got the laptop attached, you can use that. Have I got, I'm going to push OK. Should I change? I don't think I've changed anything, but I'll store that. Should also note, when you go in file, save as, save a copy. If you make adjustments, save as. So don't just hit save because it writes over the last one. I like to do save as and then do update each one. I often go like 01 and the name, 02 name, 03 name, and then it keeps them in order for me. Now let's look at tuning runtime values. ECU status, what do we got in here? Do we have logger armed? Okay, perfect. So in the logging, I've put it has to get 100 RPM to start logging. So sitting with the vehicle turned off, the engine turned off, or the machine turned off, it isn't logging. And I've done that, so if shit happens, shit hits the fan, they shut the machine down, or then the key's turned on so you can listen to the radio, and it deletes all your log. You'd have to sit for quite a while, but this way at least it'll stop. You can go to the machine, you can pull a log out of it, and it'll be current because it hasn't been running. I've managed to use 23% of the logging in my testing. So I've done a bit of testing, haven't I? 23% of logging in my memory. When you go over that memory, it just deletes the old stuff and overwrites it. So you're always going to have the current stuff. So that should give us some logging. That's cool. I think that's everything. Pretty basic system, but it's taken me half an hour to go through it. I hope I haven't gone too fast. My sheep are better than your sheep. And I hope that's been helpful. Of course, I know you'll be talking to me, and this is a great introduction to using your first link, actually, and a great Kiwi-made product. Did I mention it was a Kiwi product? Good, just checking. So, of course, if you've got any problems, Jesse, you're going to talk to me. I think you'll pick up this stuff pretty easy. Hopefully you get a laptop that isn't out of the ark. Get something good. And try not to watch too much porn on it while you're trying to do your logging. It's really try to stay focused on the logging. All right, mate. Have a good one. Catch you later.